to be a rebel is to walk with Christ and to be outside the box. And a rebel, I think, is a warrior.
Things didn't seem joyful in the beginning, but as I learned to know who God was and got to be closer to Him, I now have joy.
I gave my life to Christ, and the last 6.5 years, my life has been a complete 180.
He's the truth, the way, the life, and He has given me life.
My heart and my soul has been completely transformed because of what Christ has done for me.
I realize this is an inside game. You know, I've got to surrender my heart, my life every day, and I gotta know what my heart's really looking for, and that's true connection with a God that loves me and true connection with the people He's put in my life for this moment today.
The fellowship and accountability for other men that have gone through the same things I've gone through is what's really helped me.
You have to be that rebel to get closer to Him.
I learned how to be willing to admit defeat to win the battle.
So if we can start fixing men, start getting men to be the men they were designed to be, born to be, then I think we're going to start to see real change.
Thanks for being here. A little nervous. I've been praying up until this moment which way to really start tonight. And I think the first thing I'm going to do is, just by a show of hands, I'd like to know how many veterans there are in the room. Thank you for your service, and I salute you. You'll know a little later on why I asked that question. I'll start out with my introduction to Church and God. I was about 7 years old. It was a casual introduction. My parents said to my sister and myself, "Get in a car, we're taking you to church." Drove up to the curb, opened the door, we got out. Mom rolled down the window and said, "We'll be back in an hour." So that was my formal education into going to church. That sort of prevailed all the way through grammar school. And that was sort of, in that time period is when I realized that there was a God, and He was real. And it was my first introduction to Jesus and a few of His teachings, but it was really a casual education. When I got into high school, guess what? Church wasn't required anymore. So then, I became like probably a majority of people are, twice a year, Christmas and Easter. And I thought that was okay. It was a God of convenience. You know, you're out playing ball, and the ball goes through a window, you pray that no one saw you. That was about the extent of my praying. So, not proud of it, but sort of the way it was. My mom and dad never gave me a boost to take, a greater step in understanding what Jesus was about, who God was. My dad, he was a construction worker, grew up through the Depression. He's a very, very hard worker, good work ethic, but that's sort of where it ended. There was no real father-son bonding. Ask me about baseball, football, basketball. I don't know. I can't tell you the finer details of any one of them games. Ask me about camping. I don't know. Fishing. I don't know. You know, for a long time I was really angry and sad about that. But then you have to start thinking, What kind of education or what kind of exposure to different things did your parents have? So how far back does it go? And do you really have the right to be angry at them for those shortcomings? So my dad was an electrician, and he never pushed for me to go to college. It was sort of expected that I wasn't college material and that I would just go out and get a job in the trades somewhere. So here I am plowing my way through high school, doing my 2 annual journeys a year to church, Christmas and Easter. After high school, Vietnam was escalating, and I knew it was just a matter of time before I was either going to get drafted or enlist. So, in 1965, I decided I was going to enlist. I guess it was meant to be, because on the day I enlisted, I also got my draft notice. Well, I was lucky. I thought I was lucky, because I figured, well, okay, I'm living in Chicago. You go down to Great Lakes Naval Training Station, and that's exactly where you sign up. Of course, the Marine at the front gate looked at me sort of crazy, along with a friend, when we says, "Where can we enlist?" But that was the case, and it was in the afternoon, and so it was we did some testing and everything, and the recruiter said, "Well, come on back tomorrow morning. We'll finish evaluating the tests, and we'll sign you up." So here I am on November 3rd, raising my right hand, swearing allegiance to the country. And off I go to boot camp. No one likes boot camp. So I get through boot camp, and I guess I scored pretty good, because they decided that they were going to make me an aviation electrician's mate. For those of you that don't know, pretty much means that you're going to work on some kind of electronics in the avionics field. It could be on aircraft or on some kind of support equipment. So after boot camp, I open up my orders, and here it is. I'm going to the USS Forrestal, CVA 59, which is an attack carrier. And it was halfway through its Mediterranean cruise. Wow, first airplane ride I get to go on. I get on a commercial airliner, and they wing me across the big pond. And the next thing I know, I'm circling somewhere over the Mediterranean looking for an aircraft carrier. I get on the aircraft carrier, and I get assigned to a support equipment shop. Pretty much taking care of all of the generators, turbines, anything that has to do with moving an aircraft or getting an aircraft started. That lasted about a month and a half, when somebody thought they had a better job for me. I didn't volunteer. So I was off to the side of the flight deck, and I was changing out some fuses. And this guy and I was in a green shirt. We had different shirts when you were working anywhere on the flight deck that would designate what your duties are and where you're allowed to go. So the strange, gangly looking guy comes walking up to me in a red shirt, asks me, "What do you do?" Fuses and light bulbs. Next thing I know, he disappears, comes back about 2 minutes later, throws the red shirt at me and says, "No, you're in the crash crew." I said, "Chief, I don't want to be in a crash crew. That's dangerous." Besides, the crash crew had a reputation. They fought a lot, fist fights, and a lot of them got hurt. The hours are really long compared to being down below. See, on a flight deck, what they do is you have 5,000 plus people on an aircraft carrier. Probably, what would you say, Frenchie, 300 people on a flight deck on max? Say, try to limit the number of people, because it is very dangerous, and it's very close quarters. More people, more injuries. So there I was, going to firefighting school again, and the next thing I know, I'm out there watching planes take off. See, for the crash crew, we had multiple jobs. Our jobs were not only any kind of damage control and crashes, but we also towed the planes around. And since we towed the planes around, the tractors also had the turbines on them, which started the aircraft. So we were an integral part of all flight quarters, which meant that we were on deck an hour before flight quarters up until or farther after flight quarters ended for the day. Little did I know that that excitement was actually adrenaline. You have a 50,000 pound aircraft coming in at 140 miles an hour. The starboard wheel shows down, but it's not locked, so you don't know, is it going to crash? On top of that, there's smoke coming out from underneath the dash of the aircraft. On top of that, there's hung ordnance. That can get your adrenaline going. And that was not that uncommon. I saw my fair share of aircraft crashes. Aircraft coming in all forms of being disabled. Add to that night flights, night operations. No moon, no stars. Put your hand out like this, you can't see it. You have a 40 or 50,000 pound aircraft coming in, you're 20 feet away from it. Add to that, you have propeller-driven aircraft. Props you can't see, you can't hear. You got earmuffs on. Yes, I've seen some disasters with that too. So we come back from Europe, get re-outfitted, do a few sea trials, and guess where we're going? Vietnam. So here we are. It's July 25th, 1967. First day on Yankee Stadium, on Yankee Station, Yankee Stadium. I should have been a ball player. So the hours are long. 14 to 16 hours was not uncommon. Being in the crash crew, when they fly, you're in there. That was July 25th. July 29th was the start of being very angry at God and the world for a long, long time. But I'm going to slow down and back up one day. It's July 28th, 1967. The day was long, it was about 14 hours. We're on our fifth day of being on station. We've already flown over 700 sorties. That's a lot of flights. A lot of mishaps. So we're done. Flight quarters is over. It's probably about 10:30 at night. I know that the next morning is going to be an early flight operations. Flight quarters was called for 5:30 the following morning. Hit the sack. There's no problem because they you don't need an alarm clock. They just cued a mic. Because when flight quarters goes, pretty much the whole ship is up, except for the night crew, and they try to sleep through those wake-up calls. So I'm figuring that, okay, I'm going to get up about 5 a.m. This is July 29th, 3:15 a.m. We hear the mic keyed. That's the signal for the crash crew, because you know that 30 seconds later there's going to be a problem and all hell is going to break loose. 30 seconds later, man overboard, man overboard. Flight quarters. With that, the whole ship wakes up. 5,000 people have to muster at their muster station. There's a head count to determine, was it really a man overboard? It was. At 5:13, the announcement, 5:13 a.m. Secure from man overboard. 1 man lost, no body recovered. Ever. So now it's 5:13. No one's going back to bed. That doesn't excuse us from flying an Alpha mission, because the men on the ground, they were in trouble. We were scheduled to fly 4 Alpha missions that day, pretty much saying, if it can fly, it goes. At 6 a.m., flight quarters commences. 7:49. We complete the first Alpha strike. We have a little bit of downtime. Grab a quick bite to eat. 9:14, we recover the aircraft from the first Alpha strike. 10:34 a.m. The whole ship is abuzz. We're refueling, we're rearming the aircraft. We're doing tweaks to try to get them going again for a few small things that are wrong with the aircraft. 10:50 a.m. The first of 52 airplanes, excuse me. The first of 52 airplanes are on the catapult, ready for launching. They're all fueled. External tanks fueled. Full armament. All the safety pins are pulled. They're armed, they're ready. That was at 10:50. 10:52 a.m. An F-4 Phantom parked in the back starboard corner of the aircraft carrier. A Zuni missile fires. No explanation. That Zuni missile flies across deck toward the port side. It strikes the external belly tank of John McCain's aircraft. I'm on a tractor 2 planes aft of his aircraft, starting that another similar aircraft to John McCain's. I'm facing aft because I'm watching they call him a plane captain. You got the pilot up in the cockpit. You got the plane captain. He's responsible for that specific aircraft. He's signaling me, and we're providing the correct amount of electrical generator power and turbine power to the aircraft to get us started. So I'm facing aft. I hear a whoosh, even with my earmuffs on. The next thing I know, is I'm engulfed in a cloud of superheated red-orange. I can't see anything except red-orange. Heat beyond description. I know something's wrong, but all my training, I can't analyze it. That was at 10:52. I'm in trouble. I know these times because it's all been recorded. 10:53 and 36 seconds. 1 minute and 36 seconds after I'm engulfed in a ball of flame. 1,000-pound bomb explodes. That was underneath John McCain's aircraft. I'm probably 50 feet away. I don't know why I'm here. The only thing I can think is that something was between me and that 1,000-pound bomb. Probably the best thing that happened is it going off. In hindsight, because it blew me about 60 feet in the air, out beyond the flames. No, I didn't land on my feet. I'm picking myself up. I'm trying to determine what's going on. The next thing I know, there's a ball of flame running out of the fire, completely engulfed. It's a man. I can't recognize anything. It's completely engulfed. Me and another person. We're running. We tackle. We're rolling. We're beating. Another 1,000-pound bomb goes off. I'm in the air again. This time I land and roll, and I'm in a catwalk on the port side of the aircraft carrier. As you're facing forward on a ship, port is right, starboard is left. I end up rolling down a set of stairs. Some people drag me into this room. It's a fueling station. There's many of them on an aircraft carrier. When I say many, probably 15, 20 on either side. Wouldn't you say, Frenchie? Frenchie was on an aircraft carrier too. The people in there looked at me. They saw my red crash crew shirt and they said, "What do we do?" I says, "We leave this room." I'm familiar with every exit. Coming on and departing the flight deck. We make it over to the next exit, which takes us down into hallways. We batten down the hatches behind us. I know where I'm going. I'm going forward because I got to get back up on deck. I've got to get in front of the fire. That's what I was trained to do. Somebody stopped me in the hall and says, "You're bleeding." I says, "I'm standing. I'm going." I'm back up on flight deck. It's pretty much a blur about this time. I'm told that I got involved with fighting the fires. Somewhere, maybe around noonish, probably a couple hours into the fire, I went down again. This time I was being dragged off the flight deck. Somebody said, "He's got to be evacuated." I'm being dragged across the deck. As I'm being dragged across the deck, because I knew evacuation helicopters were already coming and going, a U.S. Air Force Jolly Green Giant landed. About then, for some reason, I'm saying, this is really bad because usually they don't bring in helicopters from land bases. I'm thrown on a helicopter. It takes off pretty much sideways, protecting its rotors from continuing explosions. 15 minutes later, I'm on the flight deck of the USS Oriskany. I'm helped off the helicopter and put on a stretcher. They dropped me down a elevator, which was actually a elevator for ferrying munitions up and down off the flight deck. I'm in sick bay. I'm triaged. They say, any bleeding you have has already stopped. We're going to put you on the side here now because we have a lot more serious injuries. The rest of that night, I remember sitting at a stainless steel table, helping people with what was like a tongue depressor, smearing some kind of a salve on strips of gauze that was being placed on people who were burned beyond recognition, but still alive. I was pretty close to one person, and their arm reached out. It's one of my shipmates I worked with. His name was Hutchinson. He died that night. The next day I was air evac out again, flown first to Da Nang, triage there, then flown again to the Filipino hospital in the Philippines. I'm not sure. I think it's about day 3 or day 4 now. We pull into the hospital about 1 o'clock in the morning, and they triage us again. The next morning, we're sequestered into a separate ward. We're not allowed to talk to anyone. Doctors are only allowed to ask us medical questions because they didn't know what happened. They didn't know at the time that it was a missile that misfired from one of our aircraft. USO finally arranges for a long-distance phone call. Back then, there were no cell phones, no satellites. I call home. I know that I can only just say I'm okay. My mom says, "Where are you at?" "I'm in the Philippines." "What are you doing in the Philippines?" "I'm in a hospital." She says, "How bad is it?" I says, "I don't know. I'm fine now." She says, "You know, 2 Navy officers were at our door 12 hours ago." This is the part that hurt the worst for me. We hear he's alive. We don't know his whereabouts. We don't know if he's been captured. You see, back then, every aircraft carrier had 2 destroyers, 1 minesweeper, 1 Russian trawler, and a dozen Chinese fishing boats with antennas. It was the enemy. So anyway, they ship us back to the States. I had to go back on the ship because I was considered walking wounded. And they wanted to debrief as many people as they could to try to figure out what caused this horrific accident. Or was it enemy fire? Back in the States, I'm into 2 years of service already. They decide they're going to discharge me early. I go through the whole process of being discharged, get off the ship. I have my orders in my hand, discharge orders. I stop in the bathroom, I change into civilian clothes. Because I knew that once I left the airport in Norfolk, Virginia, which is a military town, once I left that safe haven, I was fair game for being called a baby killer. Being spit at was not uncommon. You were made to feel ashamed of being in the military. I get home, "Are you all right?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Tell me about it." Nothing to talk about." "Sure, you're okay." "Yeah." "So what happened?" "Nothing." For those of you who have been in the service, I think you understand this. So, I get a job. I meet this beautiful young woman in 1970. Her name's Barb. 1971, we're married. She's Catholic. She goes to church every day. So we get into conversations about, what life would be like if we're going to get married. Will we have a house? Will we have children? Religion came up. I said, you know what? I think the difference between being a Lutheran and being a Catholic, there's not much. It's the same God, same beliefs other than confession. So I convert. For the next 40 years, I go to church. I master the ability to know when to kneel and when to stand and make a sign of cross, but I got nothing out of it. Pretty much still a God of convenience that I'm mad at, because I'm walking around with a lot of internal baggage, a lot of guilt, survivor guilt. Fast forward to 2000, let's see, when was it? 2004. We're living up on Scottsdale Mountain area. We're looking at some new houses down around Cactus and the 101, and I'm going down several trips I take down Cactus. And I keep driving by this nondescript building on, I believe it's 92nd Street. I hear something in my mind. Pull in there, see what it's about. It's City of Grace, non-denominational Christian church. Barb and I both had started feeling like there was something missing going to Catholic church. So boom, I think that was the beginning. I start going there. I start getting involved. I start reading the Bible. But I'm still mad. I lip sync in the choir for 10 years. You don't have to know the words. All you have to do is be able to say watermelon, watermelon, watermelon. Everyone sings over you, and you look good. Now it's 2006. It's been a slow journey, chasing after religion. I start to have problems, start to have headaches. My eyes are bothering me. I go to an eye doctor. You got glaucoma, but it's not age-related. It's traumatic glaucoma. After studying my medical history, the eye doc, Barnett Delaney, says, I am 100% sure that the sight that you're losing was caused from the head injuries when you were in Vietnam. Within 6 months, I'm totally blind in my right eye. I'm pissed. I'm mad at God. I'm mad at everything. Why me? I should digress back a little bit and tell you that a good friend of mine who was in the Marines, his wife kept telling me over 40 years that I had post-traumatic stress. I kept saying, you don't know what you're talking about. I was in total denial. Not me. I was in the military. Suck it up. Be tough. So the eye doc says, my recommendation is you go to the VA, because if something happens to the other eye, at least you'll be in the system for any extended services that might be required should you go totally blind. So off I go to the VA. I have my little file and I have my little VA application. It says, "What's your problem?" And I say, lost right sight, right eye. After quite a bit of quizzing, they said, "That's the least of your problems. We want you to go to post-traumatic stress counseling. It's severe." I start going. Guess what? My friend's wife was right. You know, it's funny how God, when you don't want to listen to Him, doesn't give up on you. And He finds another way, another path for you to discover His glory, His compassion. I'm done blaming others. I'm done blaming situations. It serves no purpose. Before I open this up to questions, and I'm fair game, folks, you want to ask a question about what it's like? And we're all curious. We're curious about what was it like for the American sniper? What is it like for a jet pilot? What is it like for a submariner who's down, 5,000 feet and there's a fire in a torpedo room? We'd like to know that, but we're timid. We're scared. We're curious, but we don't want to make that person think about, a bad situation. I'm giving you permission to ask me questions tonight about that. I'm giving you permission to ask me questions about my post-traumatic stress, and or because none of the people that were in this group with me are here. I would not use their names, but I will share with you their challenges. Because, see, post-traumatic stress is a lot different than a broken arm. A broken arm you can fix with one of just a couple of different processes, a pin, a cast. With post-traumatic stress, everyone processes different. What makes one person cry won't make another person cry. I know my stressors now. I handle them pretty good, for the most part. For those of you who were here 2 weeks ago, some of you might have noticed I came in too late. You see, that morning about 10:30 a.m., they interrupted a radio station I was listening to. To make an announcement that ISIS had taken one of their captives and burned him alive. That put me in a very, very dark place, because I've seen that firsthand more than once. I didn't want to come here that day. I came late. I stood in the back of that room when the testimony was over. I asked a few guys if we could talk, pray. I cried. I cried for that murdered pilot. I cried for their family. I cried for me. I guess my hope here is that my story about my very slow journey in discovering Christ and religion might encourage some of you who are maybe having that same frustration of, why is it taking so long? Why can't I be like some of the testimonies where I had a car crash and God was there and wow, everything is 100% right on. I'm 100% focused. That wasn't me. And I have to believe that I'm not the only one that is on a very slow, casual journey in my Christian walk. And I appreciate all of you because you're helping me with that walk. I have one other little thing that I'd like to read here, and then I'll open it up to questions. What I believe is, yes, people and situations from the past influence who we were and who we are today. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. The devil, Satan, would like to see us drown, constantly swimming around in a pot of yesterday and would've, could've, should'ves. Always only looking back, never forward. God has already forgiven us for all the yesterdays. God loves us and wants us on today's journey and every tomorrow's journey on that path to eternal peace. We are human, and yes, sometimes we will falter, but with God's grace, we will win the battle.